The moment I hit send, I knew everything at Raincrest Financial was about to snap. 5 minutes later, I sat in my parked car with rain sliding down the windshield in restless streams, and my phone vibrating so hard it rattled against the console. My screen lit up again. Marissa Clay, then HR, then a number I did not recognize, probably someone from legal. An hour ago, none of them had bothered to learn how to pronounce my name. I glanced down at the last message. I sent a single photo of my employment contract. Clause 14B circled in thick ink. It looked almost calm on the screen. The kind of calm that comes a second before impact. My phone rang again. Then again. I let it buzz. I wasn't ready to hear the panic in their voices. I wanted to savor these minutes, the ones they never imagined I would have. They really thought this would be simple, I murmured, resting my forehead lightly against the steering wheel. My breath fogged the glass. They fired me today, 4 days before payout, and they thought I'd just disappear. I closed my eyes and replayed the moment I had taken the photo, my hands steady, my pulse steady, the quiet I had not expected to feel. I remembered how my thumb hovered over the send button for a heartbeat, just long enough to accept what I was doing. When I finally pressed it, I whispered the same words I had whispered to myself every time someone tried to push me aside. Today was the wrong day to mess with me. Another call flashed, then another voicemail notification. Human resources, then legal, then Marissa again. All of them wanted to undo something that could not be undone. I watched the screen go black for a moment, the reflection of the glass tower behind me stretching across the dark surface. Raincrest Financial, the place where I had built everything and where they assumed I would collapse quietly. The phone vibrated again, and again. They were not calling out of concern. They were calling because they finally realized what I had just done to them. I took a slow breath, opened my eyes, and let the present slip away as another thought surfaced, clear and sharp. 8 hours earlier, the morning had started the way every morning did at Raincrest Financial, voices carrying down the hallway, printers humming in the background, the faint smell of burnt coffee drifting from the break room. I logged in, checked the calendar, lined up my calls. No signs of disaster, nothing unusual. At 9:23, a notification popped up at the corner of my screen. Please come to room 12B. Signed, HR Department. I stared at it for a second too long. Human Resources did not message me. They emailed. They scheduled things. They did not summon. When I reached room 12B, Mira, the HR representative, was already sitting behind the small table. She didn't smile. Ilara Winslow, she said, tone flat. We are terminating your employment effective immediately. Clear out your things before 5 p.m. My breath caught. Mira, what are you talking about? She didn't blink. The company has decided to move in a different direction. That isn't an answer. My voice came out low, steadier than I felt. Who decided this? She shifted her eyes toward the wall, like she wished she could disappear into it. Your boss, Marissa Clay. My stomach tightened. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Marissa, I said quietly. On what grounds? Mira repeated the line. Word for word. The company has decided to move in a different direction. No explanation. No conversation. 3 years wiped out with one sentence. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay controlled. Is this about performance? I'm not authorized to discuss that. Humiliation burned under my skin, hot and sharp. 4 days before quarterly payout. 4 days before the commission I spent months building. 4 days before I could pay part of my father's medical bills at Swedish Medical Center, where his treatments were bleeding my bank account dry. Mira reached for a printed packet. You'll receive a final pay statement in the mail. That's it, I asked softly. After everything, she didn't answer. She didn't need to. This wasn't her choice. I walked out of the room, every step heavy. People noticed the HR packet in my hand and looked away quickly. No one said anything. No one asked. I sat back down at my desk, staring at my monitor, even though the words on it meant nothing anymore. Why would a boss destroy someone's future on the exact week they needed help the most? The shock of the termination clung to me, but underneath it, something older began to stir. 8 months earlier, when Marissa Clay first became director, small cracks had already appeared, cracks I chose to ignore. I remembered the first incident. Ilara. "I'll handle this pitch," Marissa had said, stepping into the conference room doorway. I blinked. I already finalized the deck. She smiled with that polished, empty expression. "I'll take it from here." Clients respond better to a unified voice. She rewrote half my strategy overnight. When the client signed the contract, she announced in the team meeting, "My adjustments really made the difference." I sat there quietly, swallowing the sting. Then came the delays. Ilara. "One more revision," she would insist, tapping on my screen. "That's the third one this week," I said carefully. "We need to show attention to detail," she replied. Or, "Do you disagree?" every time she said it. It felt like a test I was not supposed to pass. But the performance notes hurt the most. I found them during one of our check-ins printouts I had never seen before. "Difficulty collaborating," she read aloud. I stared at the paper. "That has never been mentioned." She shrugged. "I document what I observe." Observations. They were lies dressed as professionalism. My phone buzzed on my desk now, pulling me from the memory. A message from Jamie, one of the analysts on my team. "Be careful. They did the same thing to Daniel last fall. Right before payout." I froze. Daniel, the senior strategist who left for personal reasons. He had stopped answering messages after that. I opened my email archives, scrolling until I found something I had forgotten, a thread from 5 months ago. Marissa had tried to mark herself as the primary account manager for a corporate deal I had spent half a year nurturing. She had never attended a single call. Not one. Seeing it again twisted something deep inside me. This wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't oversight. It was intentional, and it was repeated. If this happened to others, why didn't anyone stop it? A thought pushed through the panic, steady and familiar, the way a single clear note cuts through noise. This wasn't the first time I had watched Raincrest pull a move like this. A year earlier, I had stood in this same building when Vicky Hale, one of the strongest senior strategists we had, was called into HR on a Thursday morning. She came back pale, holding a cardboard box. "They fired me," she whispered, 3 days before payout. I remembered how everyone froze. No one asked questions. No one dared. That day left a mark. I learned something important. Raincrest valued money over integrity, and if the numbers were big enough, loyalty meant nothing. So when I earned my own promotion months later, I asked for a meeting with HR and legal. The attorney assigned to my contract, a quiet man named Leonard, had looked at me over the top of his glasses. "You want an additional clause?" "Yes," I said. "A protection clause." We went back and forth for an hour. At the end, we added a line that most employees never knew was possible. If a termination occurs within 10 days of a bonus period, full payout is required and an automatic audit of the decision is triggered. When I brought the final contract to Marissa, she barely skimmed the text. "Ilara, I trust this is all standard it is," I said, keeping my voice calm. She signed it quickly, eager to look decisive in her new role. What she didn't know was that I kept a personal scan of every page, saved in an encrypted cloud folder I checked every month. That was the win I had secured long before she tried to take everything from me. And today, 4 days before payout, her firing decision slid perfectly into the protected window. Still, one thing didn't sit right as I closed the contract files on my screen. If I had already locked in my win, why were they so sure I'd fold? I sat at my desk with the cardboard box they'd handed me, the same kind they gave every terminated employee. People walked by quietly, pretending not to stare. I lifted a stack of notebooks and placed them inside, making sure it all looked routine. But I wasn't packing. I was preparing. I opened my email and began forwarding things to my personal archive with careful precision, client praise with timestamps, performance summaries from executives who trusted me, logs showing late-night submissions, some after 11:30 p.m., proving I never once ignored a deadline. As I worked, Derek, one of the junior analysts, paused at my desk. "Ilara, I heard what happened. Are you okay?" I kept my eyes on the monitor. "Not really, but I'm not done yet." He nodded slowly and walked away. I clicked into the account dashboard, scanning the current client assignments. My stomach tightened. 2 of my largest accounts worth nearly $200,000 in projected revenue had already been switched to Marissa Clay, effective tomorrow morning. I whispered it aloud, because saying it made the truth clearer. She wanted the payout. She wanted every bit of it. My hands trembled for the first time that morning. Not from anger, something heavier. The image of my father sitting in the hospital chair flashed in my mind. The quiet smile he tried to give me when I paid another medical bill using a credit card I could barely afford. If they stole this bonus from me, his treatment at Swedish Medical Center would slip even further out of reach. I sat back, letting the weight press down on me for a moment. My throat tightened. The humiliation in HR's tone, the silence from my coworkers, the coldness of the decision, everything crashed at once. For a few seconds, I felt like I might break. Then I straightened. Breaking was exactly what they were counting on. I picked up my phone and typed a single message to Nora, a labor attorney I trusted more than anyone at Raincrest. It happened. I need your eyes on something tonight. My finger hesitated above the send button, then pressed it. What happens when someone who's supposed to protect you becomes the one hurting you? I walked back to Human Resources with the cardboard box still tucked under my arm. The hallway felt colder now, as if the building itself already considered me gone. Mira sat behind the desk when I stepped inside, her fingers tapping nervously against a folder she clearly did not want to hand over. "I need the official termination letter," I said. She hesitated, then slid the document toward me without meeting my eyes. "Here it is, Ilara. We need you to finish clearing your desk." "I will," I replied, though neither of us believed I would leave quietly. I unfolded the letter slowly. The first line hit like a slap. Performance-based termination. I let the words settle. "Interesting," I murmured. Mira swallowed hard. "This is standard language. It isn't standard for someone with my track record," I said, keeping my tone even. "And you know that. I cannot discuss details," she whispered, glancing over my shoulder toward the hallway. "Please understand, this is out of my control. Then don't rush me." I stayed exactly where I was. Her discomfort didn't move me anymore. My eyes dropped back to the page. That was when I saw it the timestamp. 11:58 a.m., 2 minutes before noon, 4 days before payout, squarely inside the 10-day protected window of Clause 14b. The clarity that hit me wasn't loud. It was quiet, clean, cutting through every ounce of fear I'd carried since morning. I folded the letter and looked directly at Mira. "You should tell Marissa something." She froze. "What?" That today was the wrong day to mess with me. Her lips parted, confused. Maybe she thought it was just bitterness, a wounded employee lashing out. She had no idea what those 11:58 digits meant. No idea what I was about to unleash. I slipped the letter into my bag and walked out of the room, leaving her staring after me as if she sensed something shifting, something she could no longer control. What happens when the person you underestimated finally decides to push back? I sat in my car during my lunch break. The same gray sedan I had driven to Raincrest Financial for 3 steady years. My hands were steady as I unlocked my phone and opened the encrypted cloud folder I had guarded like a second heartbeat. Every file was exactly where I had left it. I tapped on the contract. Clause 14B glowed on the screen. If a termination occurs within 10 days of a bonus period, full payout is required and an automatic internal audit must be initiated. I highlighted the clause, zoomed in, and took a clean photo. No filters, no edits. Just the truth captured in crisp black and white. Then I opened a new message addressed to Marissa Clay. Before 5 p.m., I suggest you review what you signed. I added human resources, legal, and the internal audit department to the thread. My thumb hovered for only a moment before I pressed send. A faint chime confirmed it had gone through. Immediately, a notification popped up. Your message has triggered a termination dispute case. A representative will contact you shortly. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. 2 minutes passed, then 3. At minute 4, my phone buzzed once. By minute 5, it was vibrating in a frantic pattern across the center console. First was HR, then legal. Then Marissa's name flashed on the screen. Then again. Her calls stacking so fast the phone barely had time to breathe between them. Voicemails piled up. Email alerts pinged in rapid succession. A text from legal read, "Ilara, please return to the building immediately." I watched it all without moving, without answering. Their panic filled the small car like heat. One sentence in a contract had done all of this. If this is how they react after one message, what are they hiding? Human Resources requests your presence for an urgent clarification meeting. The message appeared on my phone before I even stepped out of the car. They did not ask. They summoned. When I entered conference room 16, 3 people were already waiting. Helen Price, the HR director, Stephen Lowell, the company attorney, and an empty chair that told me Marissa was on her way. Helen gestured stiffly. "Please sit, Ilara." I took the chair directly across from them. No one spoke at first. Stephen cleared his throat. "There seems to be a misunderstanding regarding your termination. We're willing to offer a severance package if you agree to sign a non-disclosure agreement." He slid a packet across the table. "A non-disclosure agreement," I asked quietly. "A standard agreement," Helen added quickly. "A small payout in exchange for confidentiality. It benefits everyone." I folded my hands. "I'm not signing anything." Helen's expression tightened. "This is a generous offer." Before I could respond, the door opened. Marissa stepped in, heels striking the floor like she wanted the sound to intimidate someone. "Me, specifically, Ilara," she said sharply. "The clause you're clinging to doesn't apply. It's void for performance-based terminations." I met her eyes. "Interesting, because your performance notes don't exist anywhere except the printouts you handed me." Her face twitched. I set a folder on the table and opened it slowly. Here are my actual reviews from the last year. Not a single negative comment. I slid another page forward. "And these are client testimonials from 3 major accounts." Stephen leaned closer, reading quickly. "And," I continued, placing one more stack down, "timestamps of every project revision you requested at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., sometimes close to midnight. Not exactly the behavior of an underperforming employee." Stephen looked up, his expression shifting. "Marissa, these records contradict everything in your termination report." Marissa's composure cracked. "She's twisting this. You do not understand the full context." "Then explain it," I said. Her voice rose too loud, too fast. She was difficult. She undermined team cohesion. Helen glanced at Stephen, uneasy. Marissa had just revealed more than she intended. I sat back, letting the silence stretch. What happens when the liar in the room realizes the truth is finally louder? The air in conference room 16 had already shifted, heavy with the weight of what Marissa had just exposed. But the real fracture came seconds later. The door swung open hard enough to rattle the glass. Evan Rourke, head of internal audit, strode inside with a folder under his arm. Which one of you triggered a protected termination review without notifying my department? His voice cut straight through the room. Helen stood quickly. Evan, we were just... He held up a hand. Save it. He flipped open the folder. Clause 14B, timestamp 11:58 a.m., audit auto-triggered, and... He tossed another sheet onto the table. Discrepancies between the termination notes and Ms. Winslow's documented performance. Stephen exhaled, leaning back in his chair. That aligns with what we've been discussing. Evan turned to him. There is no discussion. Raincrest is obligated to issue full payout, immediate processing. Marissa's eyes widened. You cannot make that call. This was a performance matter. Based on falsified records, Evan asked. We pulled the digital logs. Nothing supports the claims in your report. Marissa's voice cracked. HR approved the documentation. Helen's face went pale. We were given files that appeared complete. We did not know freeze all account reassignments, Evan ordered sharply. And open a full audit into Director Clay's management decisions for the past year. What Marissa stepped back. You cannot investigate me based on her accusations. It is not based on her accusations. Evan said, it is based on your own paperwork. She looked from Helen to Stephen, desperate. This is a procedural confusion. HR misunderstood. Legal misread the context. No one in the room reacted. Finally, Helen turned to me, her voice low. Ilara, I'm sorry. We should have verified everything before allowing this. She swallowed. This never should have happened. Stephen closed his folder and stood. Given the circumstances, the company's best option is an immediate settlement. We need to avoid further legal exposure. Their eyes shifted toward me not with dismissal this time, but with caution. I rose slowly. The termination letter still tucked in my bag, its timestamp now a loaded weapon they could not take back. I walked out of the room carrying none of the fear I had walked in with. I was no longer the one they could silence or push aside. Now that the building was burning behind me, what future was I walking toward? The settlement papers were waiting for me the next morning. Helen handed them over gently, as if they might break in her palms. Ilara, she said quietly, your full commission payout has been approved. Internal audit calculated the final number themselves. It exceeds your original estimate. I scanned the figures more than $40,000 in commissions, plus additional compensation for the forced termination. More than I ever expected. More than they ever wanted to give me. Stephen, the attorney, added, your record has been cleared. No performance flags. No termination history. Human Resources will issue a corrected file today. I nodded, not gloating, not smiling, just steady. I appreciate the correction. Before leaving the conference room, I placed a sealed envelope on the table. This is my written statement for audit. Dates, emails, documentation, no accusations, just facts. Evan from audit accepted it with a firm nod. We'll take it from here. Director Clay is suspended pending full investigation. The words hung in the air. Marissa was out. Her downfall came from the very clause she signed without reading. I walked out of Raincrest Financial with my bag over my shoulder. The same one I had carried into this building for 3 years. Only now. The weight felt different, lighter, sharper, earned. That evening, I sat beside my father at Swedish Medical Center. He looked at me with tired eyes. You look calmer. He said, I am. I replied, placing the settlement letter in his hands. Your treatment continues. We're okay now. His relief was worth more than the payout. Later, when I stepped outside into the Seattle night rain, the air felt clean in a way it hadn't in months. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A new message from an unfamiliar number. We heard what happened. If you're open to talking, we'd like to discuss a senior strategist role, a competitor, a fresh start. I stood there in the rain, letting a soft smile rise before I answered. How far can a person go when they stop letting others decide their value? 2 hours after my boss slammed her hand on the table and fired me. Silver Point Systems was collapsing in on itself. I could hear it in the voicemails piling up on my phone, shouting in the background. Alarms, someone crying, and Tessa Ward's voice breaking as she said, "Ilara, we need you. Please call back. This is catastrophic." I stood at Pier 62 in Seattle with the wind pushing off Elliott Bay, cold enough to sting. My phone buzzed again, another voicemail, another voice begging. Then Callum Pierce's frantic message appeared. "Ilara, this is urgent. The whole system froze. They said you... Look, just call Tessa. Right now, please." Callum, the same golden boy son of the chief executive who did not know the difference between a server and a search bar, now sounded like a child who had lost his mother in a store aisle. I let the message play out. He rambled, stuttered, then hung up abruptly when someone shouted his name in panic behind him. My name is Ilara Wynn, and 2 hours earlier, I had walked out of Silver Point's 27th floor conference room with nothing but a cup of cooling coffee, a shaking heartbeat, and whatever dignity I had left. Pier 62 creaked under my shoes as I stepped farther out toward the water. I could almost feel the tension radiating from the device in my hand, as if the phone itself were begging me to answer. Instead, I slid it into my coat pocket. Their collapse had nothing to do with revenge. It was what happens when people in power confuse convenience with competence, and if the system was falling apart without me, that was simply the truth catching up to them. A ferry horn echoed over the bay. I inhaled slowly, long enough that the cold air settled into my chest. I knew I could not avoid what came next, even if I was not ready to hear Tessa's voice or see Callum's name appear again. 2 hours ago, they believed I was finished, but the unraveling had started long before their first voicemail. It started that morning, in the glass-walled conference room where everything truly broke. The morning had started quietly, the way trouble often does. I had barely taken 2 sips of my coffee when Tessa Ward appeared beside my desk, her expression tight enough to cut glass. "Ilara, conference room 4. Now." Her tone was clipped, formal, not a request. When I stepped inside, Callum Pierce was already there, leaning back in a chair like he owned the room, tapping at his phone with the careless confidence of someone who had never been told no in his 24 years of life. He looked up and grinned. "Morning, Ilara. Big day for me. Dad says I'm stepping into AI operations." I stared at him, waiting for the joke. "AI operations, Callum. You struggled to log into the sandbox environment last week." He shrugged. "That's why you're here." "Right. To get me up to speed." Tessa closed the door sharply. "Ilara, enough chit-chat. Here's what's happening. You will train Callum from scratch. Fundamentals to deployment. Whatever he needs." I felt the words hit like stones. "Tessa, I'm overseeing 7 critical initiatives. The statewide analytics rollout is days from testing. I can't drop everything to babysit. It is not babysitting." Her voice hardened. "It is accommodating the chief executive's family, and you will do it." "No," I said, calm but firm. "Callum needs foundational classes, not private tutoring. I will not abandon our deadlines for a vanity appointment." Callum laughed under his breath. "She's really saying no." "Wow." Tessa's face flushed deep red. "You do not get to refuse. I am refusing because it jeopardizes everything we have built. There are millions of lines of code here." Her hand slammed the table so hard the glass vibrated. "Then you are fired. Effective immediately." The door swung open as if the sound had carried straight through the entire floor. Heads turned. Conversations froze. Callum pushed his chair back with a smirk. "Guess I won something today." I straightened my spine, picked up my untouched coffee, and walked out of the room without another word, exactly as empty-handed as Tessa believed me to be. What do you do when the people who depend on your work are the same ones who tear you down in front of everyone, Ms. Wynn? "We need you to come with us." Frank, one of the security guards, spoke gently, but the meaning was sharp enough to scrape bone. Roberto stood behind him, avoiding my eyes. Tessa appeared in the doorway with her arms crossed, a triumphant curve tugging at her mouth. Make sure she only takes personal items. No company property. I walked ahead of the guards, feeling dozens of eyes follow me through the open floor. Conversations dipped into whispers. Someone tried to offer a sympathetic look, but Tessa's presence cut it short. At my desk, my monitor was still glowing. I reached to finish the email I had been writing to a state compliance officer, but before my fingers touched the keyboard, the screen went black. A system alert popped up for a fraction of a second. Access revoked by IT. Tessa leaned against a cubicle wall. Swift work. Right. We cannot risk you walking out with anything proprietary. Her words slid across my skin like ice. I opened my top drawer and pulled out a small cardboard box. Frank stepped closer, checking every item as I placed it inside the chipped mug with the faded keep pushing forward print. 3 worn notebooks, and a framed photo of my father taken a month before he passed. That's everything, I said softly. Tessa raised an eyebrow. I expected more, but maybe that is all you ever had here. I closed the box without responding. She did not know the truth that inside the middle notebook, tucked between 2 pages of notes, sat the original administrative schema for the Learning Core framework, my framework, the one owned by Win Analytics, the tiny LLC I created during my father's treatments, when I needed control over my own work just to stay afloat. Silverpoint had leased it for years. I was the only administrator trained to manage it. When I walked toward the elevators, Tessa smiled as if she had already forgotten my name. I stepped out into the cold Seattle air with a cardboard box pressed to my chest, looking every bit the defeated engineer she believed me to be. What happens when the asset they thought they owned suddenly slips out of their hands? By the time I reached my apartment in Queen Anne, my hands were numb from carrying the cardboard box. I set it on the counter and opened my laptop with the kind of dread that settles in tight lungs. The system logs flashed immediately. License pings, one after another. Win Analytics. License validation? Failure. Retry. Failure. I whispered to myself. You never renewed them. Tessa, I warned you for months. There was no trace of satisfaction in my voice, only exhaustion. My father's voice echoed in my memory, the way it used to when we worked late at the dining room table. Build things that stand without you but always know when they shouldn't. I had written that in the margin of my notebook, back when hospitals and bills were all we talked about. He had been a systems engineer his whole life, but he believed in protecting what you build, even when no one else sees its value. I stared at the logs. The framework was doing exactly what it was designed to do. No renewal, no access. Still, the sight made my stomach twist. I had no salary now, no insurance. My mother's treatment cost more every month. People like me did not get to relax into unemployment. My phone buzzed. A text from Jonah, one of the youngest developers on our team. Jonah, Tessa is saying you took company property. She's telling everyone this is your fault. A moment later, another message. Jonah, they're scrambling. Everything's breaking. They won't admit they ignored your warnings. I pressed the phone to my forehead. For a moment, I felt like crying, but the tears stayed where they were. I had not sabotaged anything. Nothing I built was meant to harm anyone. But I could feel the ground shifting under my feet professionally, legally, emotionally. The logs kept flashing. More failures, more expired tokens, more pieces of Silverpoint unraveling because no one there had listened. How long can a company survive when the truth begins to leak through its own lies? By 8 the next morning, my phone was buzzing non-stop. I ignored every message until Jonah finally wrote, "They're doing the Port Authority demo without you." My chest tightened. That demonstration had taken months of preparation, and the Port Authority was one of Silverpoint's largest municipal clients. Still, I did not respond. Whatever happened in that room was no longer my responsibility. 10 minutes later, Jonah sent another message, short, frantic. "Hey, Laura, it's bad." I opened the live meeting link he forwarded. Callum stood at the front of the conference room, trying to present with all the confidence of a man who believed a famous last name could replace skill. Behind him, the Port Authority team watched with folded arms. "All right," he said, clearing his throat. "This is our automated logistics intelligence portal, designed by, as a team effort." His hand hovered above the screen. He clicked once. The entire interface froze. He clicked again, and again. Error messages flooded the display. "Framework license expired. Access key invalid. Core module missing dependencies." A Port Authority representative leaned forward. "Is this part of the demo? No?" Callum snapped. "It is a glitch." Tessa stepped into frame, whispering sharply. "Fix it! Callum! Now! I am trying!" His voice cracked. "Someone messed with the system." One of the Port Authority leads pushed back his chair. "We are done here. We cannot trust a platform that collapses during a demonstration." Another added, "We expected professionalism. This is unacceptable." As they walked out, someone near the back lifted their phone and quietly recorded Callum's meltdown. By the time I refreshed my screen, the clip was already posted on LinkedIn. Thousands of views, comments piling up. Tessa's voice trembled. "Callum, say something." He pointed at the frozen dashboard. "It is not my fault. She built it. She set this up." I closed the laptop slowly. Would they still blame me once the world realized the truth? My phone rang while I was still staring at the LinkedIn post of Callum's meltdown. I didn't recognize the number, and for a moment I almost ignored it until I saw the caller ID, Evergreen State Medical Network. I answered. "This is Alara." A calm, authoritative voice came through. "Alara Wynn. This is Dr. Miriam Cole from Evergreen. Do you have a moment?" My grip tightened. "Yes, of course. We heard about the demonstration," she said, skipping any pleasantries. "Our internal dashboard has been glitching since last night. We tried contacting Silverpoint, but all they did was blame you." I closed my eyes. "I expected that." "Well, we don't believe them." Her tone sharpened. "You built our triage intelligence system. You trained our staff. You kept everything stable for years. We trust you, not that boy fumbling through a meeting." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Dr. Cole continued, "Can you support us independently? As a contractor or consultant, we would prefer to sever ties with Silverpoint completely." I froze. Legally, I am not sure yet. There are contracts, and I just lost my job yesterday. "We understand the risk," she replied. "But listen carefully. Ilara, we will drop Silverpoint immediately. We only want you." The quiet in my apartment felt heavy. For months, I had believed I was barely holding my position together. Tessa made me feel replaceable. Callum treated me like an obstacle. Yet here was a major client, a hospital network that relied on real-time decisions to save lives, choosing me over an entire corporation. "I need some time to review what I can legally do," I finally said. "Take it," Dr. Cole replied. "And when you're ready, call us first." The line went silent. My heart didn't. What happens when the world outside your company values you more than the people inside ever did? The email arrived just after noon, subject line in bold letters that made my stomach tighten. Formal notice from Silverpoint Legal. I opened it with trembling fingers. The letter inside was cold and clinical, accusing me of withholding company assets, sabotaging critical infrastructure, and causing material damage through intentional negligence. At the bottom, Tessa's digital signature glared back at me like a dare. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A message from Callum. "You should just admit what you did. Everyone knows you tanked the demo." I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. Another message appeared, this one from Jonah. "They're making us sign statements saying you refused to document anything. Tessa says if we don't, we're complicit." I'm scared. "Alara," a hot pressure built behind my eyes. "I never did anything to hurt them. I whispered to the empty room. I only tried to protect my work, but fear had a way of twisting every thought. My hands shook as I paced my living room, replaying every warning I'd given Silverpoint, every ignored email, every moment I had backed down to keep my job. Then, with a breath I didn't know I needed, I grabbed my keys and called the first employment attorney in downtown Seattle who could meet the same day. His office was plain, just a desk and a wall of case files. He read through my papers in silence, my employment contract, the licensing agreement, the paperwork for Win Analytics. Finally, he leaned back. "Ilara," he said, "they cannot accuse you of withholding company assets." My throat felt tight. "Why not?" He tapped the licensing clause. "Because they never owned your framework in the first place. They leased it. You hold the rights. They fired the only person legally authorized to maintain it." The breath left my body in a single, stunned exhale. If the law was finally on my side, how far would they fall once the truth landed my attorney? David Rourke sat across from me in a quiet meeting room overlooking Elliott Bay. The late afternoon light cut a pale line across the table, but neither of us looked at it. He was focused entirely on the documents spread in front of him, my employment contract, the original licensing agreement, and the articles of incorporation for Win Analytics. "Ilara," he said finally, sliding the papers toward me, "you own the framework outright. Silverpoint never purchased anything. They leased access, nothing more." I swallowed. "And firing me breached their own licensing terms." He tapped the clause with a blunt finger. "They terminated the only certified administrator. They invalidated the contract themselves." A strange stillness settled over me. "So they cannot legally operate the platform at all, not without your consent," he confirmed. "And from the sound of it, they tried anyway." My laptop chimed a reminder of the log alerts still hammering the Win Analytics server. I opened a blank message. "Hands steady for the first time in days." I typed, "effective immediately." Win Analytics does not authorize further use of its proprietary systems, frameworks, or administrative protocols by Silverpoint Systems. Continued operation constitutes an infringement. I signed my name and hit send. David nodded. "It is enough." Within an hour, my phone lit up with internal monitoring alerts. Without authorized keys, the entire Silverpoint infrastructure slid into darkness. Dashboards went offline. Scheduled jobs failed. Authentication loops spun in circles and collapsed. Then came the call. Tessa's number. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice trembled. "Ilara, we need to speak. In person." "You fired me," I said calmly. "What could you possibly need now?" A shaky inhale. "Please, come tomorrow. We can discuss terms." The shift was unmistakable. 2 days ago, she ordered me out of the building. Now she was asking for an audience. I ended the call and closed my laptop, the weight in my chest finally easing. What leverage would I wield when I finally stepped back into that building, when I stepped into the same glass-walled conference room where they had fired me? The air felt entirely different. Tessa Ward sat stiffly at the table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were pale. Callum hovered behind her, shoulders rounded, eyes fixed on the floor. Neither of them spoke. I set my folder down and took the seat at the head of the table. Not the one they used to direct me toward, the one they used for people they wanted to impress. "Ilara," Tessa began, her voice low. "Thank you for coming. I am here as the Chief Executive Officer of Win Analytics," I said quietly. "Not as your former employee." Callum flinched. Tessa nodded once. "Understood." I opened the contract. "These are the terms under which Silverpoint may regain limited access to the Learning Core framework." Tessa leaned forward. "We need to restore our systems immediately. You will," I said. "But there are conditions." Her jaw tightened. I continued. "First, Silverpoint becomes a client. Nothing more. You will license access from Win Analytics on a renewable agreement. Tessa swallowed hard. Fine. Second, Callum does not go near the environment, not development, not staging, nothing. He is not qualified. Callum's face flushed. You don't need to embarrass me. This is not embarrassment, I replied. This is protection for everyone involved. He looked down again, silence settling over him. Third, I said, sliding the final page forward. Any member of my former team who wishes to join Win Analytics is free to do so without retaliation from Silver Point. Tessa stiffened. That will gut our engineering floor. Then treat your people better. I said, but they get a choice. She stared at the contract, then signed her name. There was no fight left. I stood, gathered my documents, and walked toward the door, the reverse of the last time I had stood in this room. Except now the power sat entirely in my hands. If a single act of courage could end one chapter, what new beginning was waiting for me next? The morning they fired me, they thought I was walking away with nothing. By the end of the week, I owned everything they depended on to survive. 3 days after signing the contract, I unlocked the door to a small office space in Capitol Hill. The place was bright, warm, and open, nothing like the fluorescent maze I had lived in at Silver Point. Natalie and Jonah stood in the doorway behind me, carrying boxes of their own. This feels unreal, Natalie whispered. It feels earned. I said. Jonah laughed softly. At least this place has actual windows. Their presence steadied something deep inside me. They were not here for a paycheck or because they were trapped by corporate politics. They chose to be here. With me. I spent the morning at a new desk, laptop open. When my phone rang, the caller ID read Evergreen State Medical Network. Dr. Cole's voice was crisp. Alara, the board approved a multi-year contract. Full integration and support. We are ready when you are. Relief washed over me in a way I had not expected. Thank you, Dr. Cole. Truly. After the call, I stepped aside to breathe, letting the weight of everything settle. That was when another call came. My mother, Ilara. Her voice was soft, hopeful. I opened the office today. I said, Win Analytics is officially real. I could hear her smile. Your father would have been so proud. He always wanted you to build something no one could ever take from you. My throat tightened. I think I finally did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt like a blessing. When I hung up, I walked to the window. Seattle's skyline stretched across the horizon, a patchwork of glass and motion and possibility. I rested my palm against the cool surface, feeling the hum of the city below. Silver Point had taken my job. They had tried to take my work, my name, my confidence, but they had only cleared the path. If this was only the beginning, what might happen when a woman finally owns her worth?